Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Surovell.
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to talk about kitchen table issues myself. You know, when I talk to the folks in my caucus about the things they hear about people talking about around their kitchen table, one of the things they talk about is a lack of health care. You know, I was looking at the statistics from the Department of Medical Assistance that they give us. They send every one of you, if you don't know this, you might not look at it, a sheet about the impact of Medicaid in your district. And if you take all the sheets, the whole Commonwealth, and you add up the number of children in this Commonwealth who are currently receiving their health care from Medicaid, last year it came to 702,348 children. 702,348 children who currently get their health care from Medicaid. What does that mean? That means every single one of those kids has a parent who does not have health care. When I think about kitchen table issues, I think about people staying up late at night because they're afraid they're going to get sick because it's going to put them in the poorhouse. That's the kinds of things we hear about. What else do I hear about? I hear about people who say they're worried about having a job. And I'm not sure I heard so much about how we're going to grow jobs. I heard the governor talk a lot about growing jobs the other night. In fact, that's what he spent a lot of his time on because Virginia's economy is flat. We're not producing jobs like the rest of the country because we're too dependent on government spending. But what are we doing here to try and bring in new industries? What are we doing to try and encourage new industries? Do we have the same solar incentives, the same new energy, the green energy incentives other states have? We don't have any of it. Instead, what we see are attacks on immigrants, attacks on lesbian, gay, bisexual folks, attacks on people that will do nothing but chase away jobs. And they're coming from that side of the aisle, not from this side, folks. You heard the governor talk about it the other night. So when we're talking about bringing jobs, those are some of the things we can do to bring jobs. Let me tell you one other thing we do to bring jobs. Expand Medicaid. We can bring those billions of dollars into this state that we're sending everywhere else. 30,000 jobs we could create. That's 300 per delegate seat, folks, that we're standing in the way of. Not only would it bring people some peace of mind economically, it would also bring some jobs into this state. But why don't we talk about it? Because everybody's unhappy that it comes from a certain president. That's the reality. What else do people talk about? They talk about wage stagnation. We have some bills over here to raise the minimum wage. That's what we hear back at home. People, they want to make more money. Who else wants to make more money? Our teachers. Now, I appreciate now some of what y'all are doing in terms of trying to make it a little easier for our teachers. When I talk to teachers, they tell me they can't even afford to live in Northern Virginia on the salaries they're living. And I hear that all around the state. State employees came and told us they've had one raise in like 7 or 8 years. I mean, people are getting killed by wage stagnation, folks, because people aren't making enough money. And when I hear when my constituents talking about higher education, what I hear about is, I agree, student fees are a problem. Student fees are, though, in control of the Board of Visitors. What's in our control is the cost of tuition. And I would note that when the governor said we're not going to cut higher education, I don't remember a single person on the other side of the aisle standing up, getting on their feet to talk about what the governor said. And so, folks, those are the kinds of kitchen table issues that we hear about. And the other thing that I hear about is people worried about, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, I worry people, I'm still adjusting to getting back here, Mr. Speaker. But I also hear people talk about their safety. And it always astonishes me that here on Martin Luther King Day, a day that we celebrate a nonviolent minister who was gunned down, that we choose to make that the day that we celebrate gun rights in this building. To me, Your Honor, that's amazing. I agree. People have a constitutional right to petition their government. They have a constitutional right to freedom of speech. They also have, according to the United States Supreme Court, a constitutional right to bear arms. But, Your Honor, did it again, Mr. Speaker. I'm getting it, Your Honor. But, Mr. Speaker, we also need to look at what values we place on these issues in terms of how we treat people that come to see us. And I brought, Mr. Speaker, a couple examples. Because, we have some rules. We have some rules. If you want to come see us in the General Assembly, my friend E.T., who I've used many times, he lives in my desk. He's not allowed to carry a sign if it's on a stick. That's not allowed in the General Assembly building. And no signs on sticks. That's not allowed. We're not allowed to have sirens in the General Assembly building. We're also not allowed to have, I think they call these vuvuzelas, noisemakers. We don't like soccer fans. My aides tell me we're not allowed to bring in flags. We're not allowed to bring a Virginia flag into the building because, it might obstruct somebody's vision. We're not allowed to bring in noisemakers. Noisemakers aren't allowed. Not in the General Assembly, folks. The other thing we're not allowed to bring in are balloons. We're not allowed to have a helium balloon in the General Assembly. We're not allowed to have it in the General Assembly building, Your Honor. It's against our rules. Now, what, Your Honor, point of order, that's right. Mr. Speaker, what are we allowed to bring in? We're allowed to bring in a Bushmaster, the same kind of Bushmaster that John Muhammad and Lee Boyd Melville used to kill 10 people in Northern Virginia and wound 3 others. You're allowed to bring in a 9mm Glock, the same one that Mr. Cho used to kill 33 people and wound 23 others at Virginia Tech. You're allowed to bring in an AK-47, as we learned the other day. You're allowed to bring an AK-47, the same kind of weapon that Brian Kennedy used to shoot 2 Fairfax County police officers in 2007. You can bring that into our building, but you can't bring a sign on a stick. You can't bring a siren. You can't even bring a balloon. And Mr. Speaker, this also plays out in our legislation. You all say you're focused on you're focused on the kitchen table issues. Well, what do we see this year? We have 2 bills to put guns in airports. We have 1 bill to give guns to professors. We have another bill to put guns in colleges for everybody. We have another bill to put guns in our schools, both public, private, religious, secular, guns everywhere. Guns for everybody. It's going to be bring your own gun day every day of the year in the Commonwealth of Virginia, anywhere and everywhere you want to go. We're not the ones that are focused on that, folks. Applaud it. Go ahead and applaud it. I'd love you to applaud it. Mr. Speaker, what are the consequences of this? As you heard from the gentleman from Arlington, we had 13 states. There's only 13 states in the United States of America where gun deaths exceed traffic deaths. Only 13. We're in rare company, folks. 875 people versus 728 in 2010. And the reason that traffic deaths are so low, let me tell you, it's not because we're good drivers. It's not. What it reminds me of Marion Barry. Why Marion Barry? Because one of the things Marion Barry said that always struck me was, he said about D.C., outside of the killings, our crime rate's really low. Folks, is that where we're headed? Because I tell you, if you look at the stats where you have background checks, where you have better gun restrictions, not as many people die. And folks, we're not talking about people killing other people, okay? Out of those 875 firearm deaths in 2010, only 271 were homicides. Only 271. 13 were unintentional deaths. 576 of them were suicides. 66% of the gun deaths in Virginia, nearly every year, are suicides. 50% of suicides are at the barrel of a gun. 85% of suicide attempts with a gun are successful. The second leading cause of suicide, Mr. Speaker, is poisonings. And when you try and poison yourself, you're only successful 3% of the time. But when you do it with a gun, you get it 85% of the time. So, Mr. Speaker, this brings me back to my original point. When you look at the statistics, when you look at reality, we're not going to have a gun battle in this building or the building next door. We're not going to have gun battles on the streets. We're not going to be shot by random strangers. We don't need weapons to protect ourselves from random people that are going to come. The people that are most at risk when they own guns are the people that own them because they kill themselves or people in their family kill themselves or because people in the house end up shooting each other, people hurting each other. And when you look at the rules in our building, the rules in our building are not reflective of statistical, legal, or any kind of reality, except political reality. We need to focus, Your Honor, our rules on allowing people to speak. The First Amendment, Your Honor, from my point of view, ought to be on the same level as the Second Amendment in our building, and we ought to have more helium balloons and Zuzulas in the General Assembly building. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.